Welcome to Drinkosaurus, where we take ancient cocktail recipes into the modern era. My name's Matt, I'm your host, and let's get drinking. On today's episode, we're going to strive to make a drink that's sweet, because I know most of the drinks that I make on this channel aren't really that sweet. However, I'm going to show you how, using a technique called muddling, you can add some sweetness to your drink without making it super sugary. First, we'll talk about muddling and how you can pick different ingredients to muddle, and then we're going to pick something to muddle and build a cocktail around it. Muddling is a technique that you can use to add extra flavor to your drink, and there's so much variety for what you can muddle. You can muddle herbs such as basil, mint, or rosemary. You can muddle different food items such as cucumber, ginger. You can also muddle different citrus such as the rind of an orange or grapefruit, or even berries. Some popular cocktails that use muddling are a mojito, which uses mint, a mint julep, which also uses mint, and an old-fashioned, which some people muddle a sugar cube and orange rind. For today's cocktail, I'm going to use raspberries, because I've been on kind of a parfait kick lately, and I had a lot of raspberries lying around, and I wanted something to do with them and try to create a cocktail around them. Typically, when muddling, you have your muddling item, and then some sort of syrup or sweetening agent to muddle it into. Usually simple syrup is the most popular one, but what we're going to do today is use honey, because a friend of mine, his dad is a beekeeper, and this is some like fresh bee honey, as opposed to, I guess, artificial bee honey? I don't know if that exists, but I'm really excited about this, and it even comes in a cool jar. Something that is common when you're muddling is to not only have your muddling item and your sweetening agent, but also to have some sort of bitters with it. And I'm going to use a bitters that I previously hadn't had any idea what to do with, but they are slow berry bitters, which are sweet. They're not bitter, but bitter's the classification. And I think the berry flavor in here will go well with the raspberry. So this will form kind of our muddling base. So now that we have our base, let's talk about what spirit we're going to use to complement these flavors. We want to be careful to really feature the raspberry and not let it get buried under the heavy taste of a spirit. So vodka would seem like the most logical option, but I want something a little bit more interesting. Vodka, for me, has a very strong ethanol flavor, and I think that'll kind of come in contrast with the raspberries. So I don't want to lean towards vodka. At the other end of the spectrum, we have something like gin, which has a juniper berry flavor, which the berry of that could go well with the slow berries here. But once again, I think gin is really potent, and I think it'll cover up our raspberries too much. We could also use bourbon, which mixes really well with fruit flavors, but I think in this case, since we're not going to add any additional raspberry flavor, the potency of the bourbon would cover up the raspberry. So what we need is something kind of in the middle of that spectrum, and I think a good idea would be to use Brennivín, which is an aquavit, which is a neutral grain spirit, but it does have sort of a caraway seed flavor, which is similar to rye, but it's very subtle. So I think it'll bring out the raspberry, add some complexity to the drink, but not really get in the way too much. So now that we have our spirit, let's add some more pieces into our drink. One to make it more complex, and one to maybe add some acidity to it. Once again, for this drink, I don't want to make it too sugary or too sweet, so I'm going to avoid using an actual citrus juice for it. On the note of acidity, we want a component in our drink that'll add citrus flavor, but also keep the spirit content high. And a really good way to do that is to use Yellow Chartreuse. In previous episode, we used the similar green chartreuse, which has more herbal flavors. I find Yellow Chartreuse also has that herbal quality to it, but it has a very lemony flavor, kind of like its yellow color. So I think adding a little bit of that to our drink will add the citrus component, but not really add any literal citrus, which might sweeten the drink too much. Finally, I want a little bit more in this drink to add some more complex flavor and potentially complement the honey, which we haven't really talked about yet. And a great way to do that is with Benedictine. Benedictine is a popular ingredient in some classic cocktails. It has a honey quality to it with a little bit of spice. Another reason I really like Benedictine is it's 80 proof. Actually, Yellow Chartreuse is also 80 proof. So all of these have a very high spirit content, which will offset the water content introduced by the raspberries and the sweetness introduced by the honey. Now that we have our ingredients, we want to talk about how much of each to put in. So since the drink isn't going to be featuring the Brennivín, I don't want to put a full 2 ounces in. I'm going to put 1.5 ounces. That'll give us a good base to have a spirit quality to bring out the raspberries, but it's not going to be all about this spirit. The Yellow Chartreuse is really potent and I want to be careful with it, so I'm only going to add 1/2 ounce of it just to give you the taste of citrus, but not have it be the main star in the drink. Since honey is such a big component in our drink, I want to add 3/4 of an ounce of the Benedictine just to bring out that honey flavor. And I think with those, we should be ready to start mixing. The first thing we'll need is our mixing glass. This drink will be stirred because we're not adding any juices. And while we are adding the honey, we're going to get it pretty emulsified before we start mixing anything else. What we're going to do is we will start with our raspberries. You don't want to go overboard because every raspberry you introduce will introduce more water into your drink, and you just want to be careful not to water it down too much. So here I have about 8 raspberries, but they're small. So we're just going to dump those in there. One almost escaped. Not today. Next, we're going to take our honey. Usually what you want to do, just to make honey easier to work with, is make a honey syrup, which is combining honey with water, and then you boil it so it gets all mixed together, just so you can avoid this situation where we have to wait till all the honey gets off the spoon. And that should be good enough. What will happen is, as we add more ingredients and as we mix stuff around, that'll take its way off the spoon. Next, we're going to add our berry bitters, our slow berry bitters. I want to be careful with these because they are pretty potent and they can really overpower the drink. So I'm going to do about like 2 or 3 dashes. This container doesn't really dash well, it kind of more just dribbles in there, but you can play around with it. So now we're actually going to muddle our ingredients. And what you want to do is kind of do a press and squish motion. You don't really want to pulverize them too much, depending on... Let me take that out, it's making too much noise. Depending on what you're mixing, for example, if you're using herbs, putting too much pressure on the leaves can wilt them and it kind of ruins the flavor. You just want enough to either get the essential oils out or just to incorporate the flavors. So I'm being pretty gentle with these raspberries because they're mushy as it is. What we'll do is, to incorporate more of the honey, we'll just kind of mix this to start, just to incorporate the ingredients together. Oh, it smells good. What I like to do is, to make sure the honey gets incorporated, I'll stir the drink as I add more ingredients. That way it'll kind of dilute itself into the liquids that we have. So we're going to start with our 1.5 ounces of Brennivín, which is our base spirit. This will add some alcohol to the drink, but without interfering too much with our raspberry base. So once that's in, I'm going to give it a little more of a stir. Next, we're going to add 3/4 ounce of Benedictine. This has a nice honey character to it, so that will bring out the honey that we already have in there, but it'll still keep boozing it up. Once again, give it a little stir, make sure everything's incorporated. Finally, we're going to add our 1/2 ounce of Yellow Chartreuse, and that'll give us the lemony flavor without having to add lemon juice. That's pretty well mixed, so what we'll do now is we'll add our ice, and we have a special note about how to strain this, because as you can see, there's some debris in there, and we don't want that coming out in the actual cocktail. So adding some ice. We're gonna stir this for about 20 to 30 seconds. It's good. What we need is 2 strainers this time. So we're gonna have our julep strainer, and we're gonna put it through a second straining here into our glass. Let go, oh no, honey. He's new. We're gonna double strain it, and we have some, this requires some dexterity. There we go. So we're gonna get all those The ice is so uncooperative today. We're gonna get all those raspberry bits out. We're going to get our ice cube out of there. Goodbye. We wanna give this a good zhuzh. So as you can see, there's still a few liquid there. And a good kind of best practice is to smush down that raspberry, and that'll squeeze out just a little bit more of that raspberry flavor. In terms of a garnish for this drink, a lemon works really well, just because we have a lemon flavor in there. So what we'll do is we'll get the rind of a lemon, and we'll express the oils, and then we'll be done. So let's see if I can actually do this well. I've been practicing. Yes, look at how good that is. That is some quality. I dropped it on the table, but you know, it's improvement. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna express the oils over there. I don't know if you can see it from the camera, but there's a fine mist of lemon oil. We'll give it a little zhuzh around the glass. I have to stop using zhuzh. We will put it in there. I don't really know the conventions behind whether you put it in or not. I think in this one, having the little lemon as a decoration will be good. And I present to you Merry Christmas! Yay! That's what we named the drink. It's not holiday themed. It's all we could come up with. Let's give it a taste. So right away, the sweetness from the raspberry and the honey comes in, and also the sloe berry. It tastes almost like an old-fashioned lemon candy a little bit, like those old lollipops that you used to get at like the dentist office and stuff, or the doctor's office. So it has almost like an artificial lemon flavor, but in a really good nostalgic sort of way. So it's a really sweet drink, but it's not sugary, which is important. I find that when drinks are sugary, they're more filling than they need to be. And if you have it before a meal, for example, it kind of fills you up before you actually have your food. So I like this as a compromise for making a drink with sweet-inspired flavors, but is still spirit-forward and still very much in the nature of cocktails. So this drink was created by having raspberries and using that as the base. You can create so many drinks from just changing what ingredient you're muddling at the beginning and then picking your other ingredients around that. Drinkosaurus is a production of Little Giant Monsters. If you would like to see more of what we're working on, check us out on different social media platforms. We also have a Patreon, so please consider supporting us there. If you have any questions for me or have any ideas for future videos, please leave comments down below. I get really excited when there's comments. That's all for this episode. Have fun and limit your drinking. Bye.